Welcome into the latest episode of the 5 Reasons Podcast. I'm Ethan Skolnick here, as always, with Chris Whittingham. Now that you've found us, make sure that you hit the subscribe or follow button on your favorite podcast provider. Also, check out the other 13 podcasts in our network. Our most recent was actually a teammate and a favorite passing partner of this next guest when they played together for the Dolphins. Chris Chambers is hosting a podcast in our network on fitness and performance. That'll be with Shay Tab and Zach Duarte. Every Monday, first full episode is out next Monday. So he's going to whip our asses in the network into shape or something along those lines. Anyway, we've got a special episode. This was not a planned episode as we came into the week, but we found out that Sage Rosenfels will be home alone tonight, and we decided that we wanted to give him some company. And also, I saw what he dressed as on Halloween. You go to his Twitter feed, at Sage Rosenfels 18, Sage at 40. He is a purple Teletubby. And so we welcome in Sage Rosenfels to the podcast today to do what was originally supposed to be a very serious podcast about politics, but I'm not sure it's actually going to get there. But Sage, thank you for joining us tonight.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. What was I going to say? Oh, can I swear on this thing? I was
yes,
yeah,
of course.
Okay, because I'm probably going to swear. So here's the deal. You brought up Chris Chambers, which I'd love to see Chris Chambers next time in South Florida. He was a great teammate. I loved him as a teammate, and he was a great receiver. Probably one of the more just naturally athletic, crazy, rangy guys. But his nickname was C Murder, and I have no idea why. I think Ray Lucas gave him that nickname. But C Murder was something else and a great team. And I want to listen to that podcast next week.
Well, Sage, actually, I believe, okay, and you're as white as I am, but I believe that was a rapper at the time. And I think that's how Chris got the nickname and how Ray gave him the nickname. So I believe that's where that came from.
Somehow this is going to turn into a Morlon Greenwood podcast, I think. Or something.
There's a reference. Blow the skylines out of proportion. That was the name of the song. I actually went to a recording studio. We're off track already. I went to a recording studio with Morlon Greenwood, actually in South Miami, where he was recording his first album before he had a tackle in the NFL. Those were good times.
I feel like even most of the Dolphins fans are like, who are they talking about? Because we're talking about like a very specific era in like the 60 years of Dolphins history or whatever it's been. So
yeah, well, I feel like Morlon Greenwood is one of those anonymous names from like that's sort of associated with the Dolphins' failure to get any good players. Oh, remember Morlon Greenwood? He played a lot and wasn't any good.
You know what the Dolphins, though, they were smart enough not to pay him. I'll give him that, right? I mean, sure. He wasn't a bad player, but when he came up, the Texans gave him a huge contract, and Morlon went and made his money there. Ultimate, that was his rap name, I believe.
Yes, he went by Ultimate.
Was he Jamaican?
Yes, he was Jamaican.
He was like Jamaican with a lisp. I'm not even trying to be mean.
Wow.
Like that's like
I know
has a list
that
too,
is
right?
some combination.
That's true. He actually performed at a reggae festival that I believe was at Broward. I think it was at the Broward Center for the Performing Arts or something along those lines that I went to. He was big in that game, but I don't remember a lot of.
Ethan, do you ever get sent any good assignments?
No, I got sent to the Dolphin game today, Chris. That's not a good assignment. By the way, we're not going to talk that much football on the pod.
He didn't get sent to India. Levitar got that story because he worked for the Herald.
That's right. That's exactly. That's how that works. No, I got sent to a game today, Sage, and we're not going to talk too much football today, but I got sent to a game today where the Dolphins somehow won 13-6, even though they went 3 and out on their last 4 possessions. And they had 7 first downs for the entire game, which is the second fewest they've ever had in a win in their history. The fewest was 6 against the Jets a few years ago, 2010, I think. So that's
I will say 2 things to this, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I was with David Carr one time. I was actually in IR and I was home, but I was with him and we got a win in Oakland, and he had negative yards passing. We had a win with negative yards. Ron Dane ripped off like a long run or something like that, negative yards passing. And I will say this, we're going to talk about my quarterback play. I wasn't always good, but I always made it interesting. And I never was in these like shitty 13-6 games. It was like, say, so 3 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. But it was interesting. Like, the shit was fun. He may have got him down by 3 touchdowns, but he brought him back. It was a good game at the end. And anyway, we could talk about my Buffalo game. That's probably why I have such admiration for for Chris Chambers.
Yeah, no, I do remember the Buffalo game. I also remember the first Baltimore game. We won't talk about that one quite as much, but
first play though, 88 like an 80-yard touchdown to Chambers. So and then it all went downhill from there.
I don't see any negative yards passing in the career game logs of David Carr.
No, not David Carr. David Carr. Yes.
Yeah, it was David Carr. Yeah, I'm on his Football Reference page. I don't see any negative yards passing.
I think if you included sacks or something in it or whatever, actually ended up being. Right. Yeah, it was.
I'm gonna spend the whole podcast on Football Reference to see if I can.
Yeah, maybe it was 5 yards. Check Oakland 2006. That's the.
Okay, I have a Houston Indianapolis game in 2005 where he had 48 passing yards and 42 yards after being sacked.
No, 2006. Okay. Yeah, maybe. In 2006, we had a win at Oakland, and it was an ugly one. So
Oh, you know what? You're right. 7 of 14 for 32 yards.
He passes the whole game when he started the whole game.
5 sacks and for 37 yards, negative 5 yards passing, and somehow Houston was able to manage 23 points in the midst of all this. How did this happen?
We had a fumble recovery touchdown and a special teamer.
You had a 58-yard fumble return for a touchdown. Wally Lundy had a 3-yard rush. I don't know who that is. And then Chris Brown kicked 3 fourth-quarter field goals to win 23-14. Not only negative 5 passing yards, in a multi-score victory.
Yes, and I think here's the deal. Like they would get the ball. We would get a turnover on the 5-yard line. Like we're literally going to get 5 yards, and we kicked a 50-yard field goal. I mean, it was incredible.
The Houston Texans had 2 interceptions of Aaron Brooks on the day. And forced 3 fumbles.
Yeah, Aaron Brooks. Yep.
Good times.
Aaron Brooks was from Newport News, wasn't he? An Iverson.
That's right.
Neck of the woods. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. All right. So this is something for Adam Gase to aspire to: negative yardage, and to still somehow to win a game, because that's the direction. So I've got one football question for you, because Chris knows this is all I've been focused on for the last 12 Dolphin games, and then we're going to move to politics and other things. The Dolphins have – Chris knows where I'm going with this. The Dolphins have not scored a point on their last 12 first drives of the game. Their last 12 first drives of the game. No field goals, no touchdowns. How incompetent do you need to be as a play caller and a coach for that to happen? I'm not loading this question up at all.
Well, here's my thing is I think you guys understand, and Ethan, I know you definitely cover multiple sports, obviously I always thought you were a Dolphins guy. I didn't realize you were more an NBA guy until all the Heat stuff with LeBron or whatever. But anyway,
I'm a bandwagoner, Sage. I'm a bandwagoner.
You do realize, and no offense to Spoelstra, I'm sure he's a hell of a coach. But in the NFL, coaching is so much more important than any other sport, and definitely more important than basketball. And you see that with those opening drives. I mean, as you saw, the Packers who are moving the ball, right? New England who went right down and scored. And you see the Saints today went right down and scored. Those are the best offenses in football. That's coaching. They've got great quarterbacks and whatever, but the fact that all those guys can consistently have know what you're going to get in the first drive of the game, formation to get the ball in your playmakers' hands and just execute your way down the field. These good teams do it, and I think it's all I think a lot of it's coaching.
Well, Kansas City during those same 12 games, okay, and I know people are going to say Mahomes is great and whatever, but people didn't know Mahomes was great, okay, from the very beginning. Last 12 games, first drives, Andy Reid's teams have put up 61 points. 61 points. The Dolphins have none. Okay. Okay.
This is what I'm trying to say. At Baltimore, 77-yard touchdowns, first fucking play of the game. I was pretty psyched about that. You know who my coordinator was that game?
We've discussed this before. You asked me this on the last podcast, and now I've forgotten again. Okay.
Chris Forster.
Chris Forster. That's right. Chris Forster.
Do you know who my quarterback's coach was, who just got fired, by the way?
Todd Haley?
Mark Trestman.
Yeah.
Where did he get fired?
Yeah, Mark Trestman.
The Toronto Argonauts won the Canadian the CFL championship last year, the Grey Cup, and then he got fired this year. So,
wow.
Trestman. I like Trestman as a coach. I like smart guys. He was definitely a smart guy.
Well, he should have been the head coach of the Dolphins during that period of time, I believe. We'll get back to Sage Rosenfels here in a second, but first, I want to tell you about a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, and that is BetDSI.com. We've been telling you about it for weeks. You've got to use the promo code. You can still use this code. It still works. Reason101. That's Reason101, and you will get your initial deposit matched up to $2,500. Now, football season down here not going exactly as expected, especially for one of the two teams. But you've got the odds for this week, Chris.
Yes, the Miami Dolphins go into their away game against the Green Bay Packers. You can watch it with us at Uncle Al's, by the way. They're 9-point dogs going into that game, despite being above 500 and despite the Packers being below 500 after losing on Sunday Night Football. And then the Miami Hurricanes, after another loss at home, I think Duke were more than a one-score underdog. I hope you took the money line on that. Georgia Tech is the next game for the University of Miami. It's in Atlanta, and the Hurricanes are 4.5-point dogs going into that one. 4.5-point underdogs against Georgia Tech. You would not have had that ahead of the season. But again, you can bet all this and much more over at betdsi.com. Be sure to use the promo code REASON101.
And Chris, as you're mentioning, you can watch that Dolphin game against the Packers. I don't think I've ever seen a line that was that high for a home team with a losing record against a road team with a winning record. But I think there's two things at play here, Chris. One is people don't think that the Dolphin offense is very good. And two, we're hosting a watch party, and we're 0 for 5 in watch parties. So I think the information went out to the smart money people on this one. We're hosting a watch party at Uncle Al's in Sunrise. Now, we're going to be very clear. There are two Uncle Al's, and you should frequent both of them. But the one that we're going to be at is the Uncle Al's in Sunrise. This is the new location, 10033 Sunset Strip. Now, the game has been moved to a 4:15 start. Now, we're going to be out there starting at about 3 o'clock, maybe even earlier. So make sure that you come out because we're going to have dedicated specials, food specials, drink specials. We will have giveaways, and we'll have a bunch of hosts. We've had a good time at all 5 of our previous watch parties, even though the South Florida teams have lost all 5 games. And the other good news here is Whittingham won't be there till after halftime because he's got to do the halftime show for W.
Why is that good news?
Well, I don't know, because you're so dour at these things.
Oh, come on.
You're just expecting the worst. But you make sure that you get out there before 4:15 because you have to watch the Dolphins go 3-and-out on their first Adam Gase drive. So come out to Uncle Al's and Sunrise.
I'm the dour one?
On Sunday. And now back to Sage Rosenfels. All right, I want to move to this because otherwise we're never going to get to it. So basically you have decided, okay, and look, I understand that some people get upset about me putting some politics out. I try to avoid it on the 5 Reasons account. When I do it, I get sort of a slap on the wrist from people in the network. So I try to avoid it as much as I can. I do it a lot on my Facebook page because that's a little bit more of a sort of a sealed environment. But you are a public figure still, okay? And you have been open about politics. And you have gotten backlash from it. And I'm just wondering, because we have an election coming up on Tuesday, and we're not telling anybody here on this network how to vote, okay? We just are telling people to vote, okay? To go out and vote, participate in the process. And I was having a conversation with Kenny Stills today, and I think we know where Kenny Stills' leanings are, but Kenny Stills has also walked the
He's a
the
DeSantis
talk.
guy, right?
Yeah, he's a huge DeSantis guy, Kenny Stills. But he's right. But he's been out there. He's talked to people. He's worked with, local police. He's worked with local fire. He's worked with the community. And I asked him what he's doing on Tuesday, and he says he's getting buses and vans together, and he's getting people to the polls. Like, that's what he's doing on his Tuesday. NFL teams have Tuesday off, and that's what he's doing with his off day. And I find whatever political side of the spectrum you're on, I find that admirable, that's what he's decided to do on his off day. But clearly, Kenny Stills gets backlash for it. Like, when Kenny Stills doesn't score touchdowns, you go into his mentions, and there's a lot of people who may be on the MAGA side of this who think he's focusing too much on politics or this or that or whatever. You're not playing anymore, but you still get the backlash. When did you decide you were okay with the backlash this was going to come from it?
Well, after I retired, I counted how much money I had. I figured out how much investment and money I was bringing in every month on all these real estate deals that I'd had done. I knew what my budget was, and at one point I realized I had fuck you money, and I didn't give a shit what people thought about what my politics were. I don't have to work for anybody. I don't need anybody's money. I don't need to have a job. Everything I do is because I want to do it. And I think this is really important. It's how I was raised. I was raised by parents who I would call them sort of activists. They were definitely protesters during the civil rights movement in Vietnam. And so that's why I do it. I'm not, listen, if ESPN doesn't hire me to call college football games, I'm living in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm raising my 3 kids, trying to, do as much as I can. And I do try to work. I do a lot of work, actually. I'm pretty dang busy. But for me, it's worth it. I think that it's probably worth it for me just therapy wise. I get to speak my mind, and I'm sure sometimes I say some dumb shit. And sometimes I learn about certain things when I make comments and people come back with an interesting response. I go, that's interesting. I never had thought about that. Twitter to me has been a sort of a place to, speak your mind, have an opinion, make a comment about shit that you see, which I find is absolutely unacceptable in this country. And life's too short, and I want to sleep well when I go to sleep and not have regrets. And I think it's a really important time. I think this shit is unprecedented. I thought what was going on with Obama when he was president, though no president is perfect. That was the worst 8 years in the history of our country, is what I heard from people. Like, what world are you living in? And now that everything is just great because our unemployment's low, and everything else is just great. We have synagogues being blown up, and we have people being basically being separated from their parents just to prove a point. We've got a total political stunt going on here. The stuff that's happened the last 2.5, 3 years to me is unacceptable. And if people don't want to follow me on Twitter, fine. I don't really care. If people don't want to, whatever, listen to me on the radio or read my articles in The Athletic that I write once a week, I don't really care. I enjoy doing those things. And again, I just think for me, it's too important. And I feel very fortunate that I have a platform, though not as big as Drew Brees's or Peyton Manning's or Tom Brady's or even Kenny Stills is right now. But whatever platform I have, I'm going to use it to try to sort of better the causes that I feel like are important. And those causes aren't for me to, make more money and for rich people like me to pay less taxes. That's for damn sure.
I think one of the things that is a detractor for people using social media is a lot of people don't like what ends up happening in their replies, right? I've said this, that I just don't think humans were prepared for a steady barrage of people telling you you're wrong and you're an idiot and here's why. I just don't think humanity, the human brain was not prepared for a sort of immediately accessible response to everything that you're doing. I guess, how do you take it on board, and what have you made of it since you started becoming politically active, at least on social media? Because I feel like that's the number one reason why people don't.
Okay, so I was a quarterback. I was a backup quarterback. I've been taking criticism my entire life. Instant criticism on how I did, what I was thinking, and did I do it right or wrong? And usually there's always constructive criticism. There's always something you could have done, right? So to sit there and have people, throw shit at you, sometimes I actually learn things. And sometimes I don't care what people say when they say shitty things about me. I really don't. It doesn't bother me. I accept what my career was. I had some really good games. I had some bad games. I played for 12 years, wasn't the greatest quarterback in the world, and I wasn't the worst either. And I worked hard. I came from a small town, and I guess I beat the odds. And so, yeah, I can accept sort of what my life situation, what it is, and I can accept whatever criticism people give me. I also, and this is, you guys want to hear a secret about Twitter? What's nice and when I do these things is that I get to choose which person to respond to. Mm-hmm. And if you come at me with just a total asshole comment, and there's like, fuck you, you're a fucking asshole, and you're a liberal, and you're a whatever, I'm not going to that's going to work me up. If anything, I'm just going to make a nice comment to you, like blessings to your family, because it just shows how much of an asshole you are. There's nothing constructive about what I do. I also get to do this. When people come at me and they spell things wrong, or they do the Y-O-U-R thing and say, you are an asshole, and they write Y-O-U-R. I'm like, oh, this fucking guy is going to get it. You know what I mean? So there's a nice thing within all of that too, that you get to play with people a little bit. And I think people who like me, and people who don't like me don't follow me. And that, or they do follow me because they still like me enough because they probably think it's thought-provoking, or they just sort of like me for my football takes. And I probably have, my football takes are on Saturdays and Sundays and a little bit here and there. And then during the week, it seems like it's politics. And because that's what people are, they'll flip from ESPN to CNN or Fox News or whatever tomorrow. and talk about what the hell Trump said last night, at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, my favorite part of the your thing is when you get the your stupid one and with the YOUR stupid. Those are always the best. Those come in quite a bit. I have on my Instagram account, I mostly are pictures of my 4-year-old. But I've decided on my Instagram account, because it is a little more open than my Facebook, that I'm going to post basically, the political tweets that catch my eye, essentially. And I post them on my personal one. And there's this one guy, and sorry, he just sits there all day long. He's a Dolphin fan, and I will say, Sage, this is more of a Dolphin fan thing than a Heat fan thing. For sure. And listen,
hold on. The NFL, all the fan base is the NFL. There's a reason this whole anthem thing.
Oh, I know.
Is different between the two leagues. I mean, it's a different. What's the phrase? It's a different demographic. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yes, and there's this one guy who he just stalks my posts all day long, and he's always the first to comment, and there are always 6 grammatical mistakes in the first 2 sentences, with a bunch of things spelled wrong, and I've kind of let him live, Sage. I decide, am I going to block him? Am I not going to block him? But I've kind of decided that I enjoy him posting there, because basically what happens is, as soon as he posts, there are 20 people who follow me for the right reasons who just sick him immediately. And
you got hound dogs. You're like Clay Travis of the Miami.
Right. Well, on the opposite side of that spectrum, because Clay, if you recall, the day that Kaepernick was signed by Nike, and Nike's stock went down briefly, and I bought it by the boatload, basically. But when it went down that day, and Clay said it was the worst decision that a company had ever made, since that date, I looked at it yesterday. It's exactly 2 months since they made that announcement. The Dow is down 4.4%, and Nike's down 2.7%. So yes, Nike's down, but it's down less than the rest of the Dow, basically.
Well, it's obviously not the worst decision ever made. I think if you think about it, the United States is 350 million people. The world is over 7 billion, and the other 6.7 billion, probably would agree with that commercial more than the, whatever the percentage of the United States is of the 350 million.
So tell us what you're doing, because that one of the reasons we want to get you on the pod today, again, is because you've taken a very active role. And look, again, we don't want to get overly political on the podcast, but I feel like most sane people are against Steve King. You can have a debate on policy, on a lot of different things, but if you're not familiar with Steve King, you're from Iowa. You went to Iowa State. Obviously, so you're familiar with the politics up there. Steve King's been in Congress a long time, and Steve King just says a lot of racist things. Even if you have a debate about whether Trump says racist things, which to me is not a debate at this stage, but I know some still want to debate it. Steve King is a whole nother level above that. So how have you decided to put your name behind this? Because I think this is instructive for other athletes or former athletes on how they can do it.
So Steve King has been there I grew up in Eastern Iowa, which is definitely more purple, if anything, and maybe even a little more blue than Western Iowa is very red. Steve King's been the rep there, and there's 4 districts, I guess they call them 4 districts in Iowa, and he's the rep of the 4th district. And he says, I would call them, they're less ambiguous, like Trump's ambiguously racist, and Steve King's just a little more like that seems pretty racist. We can't have other people's babies or these weird sort of things. He retweets things from these Eastern Bloc, Austrian, literally the KKK of Austria, the white nationalists of Austria, or the Nazi Party of Austria. He will retweet things from them, and he wins by 20, 30 points every single time. And this year he is in basically a dead heat with a guy who's a former athlete. He's 38 years old. His name's J.D. Schulten. And he and I have been talking for, 6 to 9 months, maybe almost up to a year, about that he was going to run against him, and he's going to have a chance to win. I think I saw he won the primary or whatever. And he's got a real chance to beat him. So he's a former athlete. He played baseball in minor leagues in Europe. moved to Seattle and end up running. He's from there and end up wanting to move back to Iowa, be around his family, raise his kids, and run against Steve King. And it's really going to be a really close battle. And tomorrow on Monday, I'm driving over to Ames, Iowa, and I'm going to do basically a campaign. Like the Obama speech the other day with that you went to, Ethan. I'm going to do something like that on a much, much smaller scale at the university library tomorrow, and try to get these college kids who it's their freaking country. It's going to be their country for the next 40 years or whatever. They're going to get these jobs, and they should start taking advantage that they're going to be running this country. And I'm trying to get as many kids to vote. And probably give my speech as to why people should vote for J.D. Scholten instead of Steve King. Hopefully it helps. That's one of the things I can do. Use my platform as an Iowa State grad. People seem to respect me there. People seem to like me there. I get invited back to the games, and I call a couple of games, and I work for the school a little bit here and there. People sort of think I'm a little bit of a hero, I think, even in Iowa or whatever. So, I'm going to use that platform and use that fame that I have to try to help this guy win this election. One, I really actually just do like the guy and what he stands for. He's everything you'd want as an Iowa politician. He's not this overly, far to the left, whatever, San Francisco liberal, if you want to call him that. He is like a Midwestern. He's all about farming and the family and this, that, and the other. And at the very worst, anybody would be better than Steve King.
Right, and that's definitely like sort of one of the 5 people in Congress that's just like the sort of the bottom of the barrel in terms of people in the Republican Party don't even want to associate with this guy. But I guess sort of why this venue, why a college campus, and certainly young people in terms of politics have become a huge focus because, as you said, it's their country and they have not really participated in democracy. Do you anticipate? And I'm not asking you to be Chris Matthews or anything, but do you anticipate that there will be increased participation from people in Iowa because all of a sudden, and this is happening in Texas too, where people in various states just think that there's no chance of a blue candidate winning, and so they just don't even bother. Do you think that people, now that they see that this is a close race, will bother?
Well, yeah, I hope so. It does seem like that. I saw some numbers the other day that in a lot of different states, the pre-election day, voting has been up, 200, 300%, already over like the entire totals of some of the stuff, from the last midterm or a couple of midterms ago. So, I think that's the thing. Young people vote at like a 20% clip. I mean, it's incredible. 20% clip. And, the reason a lot of our policies are trying to make old people happy is because by the way, old people don't like change. They're uncomfortable with it. So of course they would be wanting things to be like the way they used to be, when the world was simpler. And young people they have all these other things going on and they don't realize how important it is and really how much power they have. Just like the NFL players are probably just realizing now that they've got more power. And NBA players are also seeing that. LeBron out, people have more power than you realize. And I think we got to get these young people to really understand, like, do you like what's going on in Washington right now? I mean, does this seem fun to you? It doesn't seem fun to me. It doesn't seem fun to, my dad's side of the family is Jewish. Like, this shit fucking sucks, and you have a chance to do something about it, or we can let the assholes win. Like, that's the way I look at it. And it's, and I hope they do something about it. I hope that that generation is different than, the oldest generation that there is right now, which I think is, I don't know why that they think the way they do.
All right. So final one on this. So you're in an NFL locker room, and we know the way NFL locker rooms work. And typically, I found that the politics kind of split two ways, and it splits racially a lot of times. It's always struck me that white NFL players are very conservative. Typically, your offensive linemen, a lot of your quarterbacks, etc. Whereas African-American NFL players tend to be more liberal. I mean, that's the way it splits, but it seems really split in NFL locker rooms. So were people
I wouldn't think tend to be. I would say I probably found very few, if any, minorities that were conservative. I don't know if there was any.
And the other way, because other than like Chris Long, okay, who obviously is, very out there on this stuff. Like, when I encountered,
I don't know. I think it's 70-30 or something like that the other way. I don't think it's as, I don't think it's like 90-10 or anything. I have a lot of friends who played, most of my Texans teammates, my Texans teammates, I would say, sort of the white guys that I hung out with, I would say those guys are probably split 50-50.
Really?
If not even more liberal. Yeah. But, that was that team, and all those guys got along really, really well. So, yeah, it definitely wasn't, all liberal guys by any means, but it was probably more 50-50. Dolphins, I would say, yeah, it was probably like 80-20 or something like that. But, like Zach Thomas and I would talk about, he was conservative. He's from Texas and he was conservative. But he and I really enjoyed talking politics together, talking about, war. I feel like this was, when Bush was the president, and obviously his guy from Texas, and the Iraq war and all that stuff, and 9/11 some guys liked talking politics and some did. Zach really enjoyed it. I think everyone liked learning different aspects from the other guys who were, again, from raised differently and from different parts of the country, but you knew in your heart that Zach was a great guy, right? I mean, he was just, as I said, he was super authentic. He worked his tail off. He'd have done anything for you. When a guy literally basically puts his life on the line for you, it's you can have a conversation with those guys. It's the people who don't give a shit about you at all that you can't talk to.
But hasn't that changed? Because, the way I look at the political discourse, you could have policy debates about, again, the Iraq war. Okay. You could not like Bush. You could believe he was run by Cheney. You could not like Obama. You could not like Clinton. You could not like, you could have supported Obama over McCain or vice versa, or Obama, Romney. I feel like this is different though. Those were just disagreements about where the country should go, what it should do in foreign policy, what it should do domestically, what it should do about taxes. I feel like this is a debate about whether it's okay to call NFL players SOBs, or whether it's okay to call Mexicans rapists or Muslims terrorists, or this feels different. I wonder what it would be like in an NFL locker room now, because if you're on one side of the spectrum or another, if you're playing with somebody who, let's say you're a progressive or liberal African-American player. Okay. And you're playing with someone who is openly MAGA, okay, is a big Trump supporter.
Yeah, Richie Incognito.
Okay,
there's something like that.
Right, there's an example, okay? And you're playing with somebody like that, and, Trump comes out the night before and says something it is, like you said, ambiguously, it might be a kind way of putting it, but leans
calling Maxine Waters low IQ, or calling every black guy a thief,
or calling LeBron James dumb. Okay, and I covered LeBron for 5 years every day, home and road. Okay, LeBron may be a lot of things to a lot of people. He is not dumb. Okay, he has the best recall of any person I've ever been around in my life. Okay, and if there's ever a criticism of LeBron, it's that he's too manipulative about things. Not that he's unaware, okay, but that he's, sometimes manipulating. And this is going on with the Lakers now, with Luke Walton again and all the rest of it. It's not that he's a dumb human being. LeBron is not a dumb human being by any means. And the team that I covered, the Heat teams, were the most intelligent teams, and I covered all the sports, okay? The most intelligent teams I ever covered were those Heat teams, when you had guys like Chris Bosh and Ray Allen and James Jones and LeBron James and, on and on and on, with that particular group. So I guess if you're in a locker room and you're an African-American player and you're playing with someone who's got, Trump stickers on the back of his pickup, how does that work in a locker room these days?
I don't know. That's a good question. I'm not in those locker rooms, really anymore. And it was never this severe. I retired in 2012 and it was never this nuts. And so I don't know. I don't even know how that would work, to be honest with you. And I'm sure that's why, most coaches basically say no politics in the locker room. I don't want people discussing. I don't want any arguments about it, and yada, yada, yada. Or at least we can't have any arguments about it, because, stuff gets heated. And what you said, Trump says some absurd things like calling LeBron James, who literally just like whatever built the school or is funding a school or whatever that whole situation is. And like, but he said something bad about Trump, and he just, you have to attack. If somebody says anything bad about you, you have to call them a terrible person in some way. And for me, that's what's hard, is that people I don't know how like a Richie Incognito doesn't see that. Like, how can you allow that? How can you be okay with that? Just that bullying mentality. And, my guess is
he kind of has a bullying thing, doesn't he?
There's a bullying thing, and people that like to bully don't mind it when other people bully. That's how you get your way. Or when people challenge you, you just bully them back and use whatever leverage you have, and you attack somebody else's weaknesses. All right. You try to make them look like their opinion has no value. Right. I mean, the national anthem thing to me is of trying to basically call people unpatriotic or un-American. Once somebody is deemed unpatriotic or un-American, their opinion doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. Why would I believe anybody that is unpatriotic or doesn't love this country? That's what that's all about. So the opinion of the criminal justice system is messed up, or racism still does exist in this country, that has no value because you don't love America. So why should I listen to you? That's what that sort of bully thing is about. And to me, it's gross.
I guess, and I can understand why a coach would not want it in the locker room, because isn't the sort of further polarization of all this that there would be, as we describe, MAGA teammates, because it's not just that you're on opposite ends of the political spectrum. Is that it's almost, I disagree. Like I hear this all the time as it relates to gay rights issues, where it's I don't agree with your lifestyle, right? And that's sort of the language with which it's discussed. Well, if one philosophy is not just I disagree with you, but I don't acknowledge your viewpoint, and I think that you're like the whole idea is you should be fired because of your stance. How can those two people coexist in the same work environment, and wouldn't that sow discord?
Yeah, no, I'm sure that it'd be a huge problem if people are talking about in the lunchroom as much as I talk about with my random buddies. When I have lunch with them or whatever, it's a totally different situation. By the way, on top of it, coaches, I definitely are. White coaches are, I would say, much more conservative, even more conservative than players, which I find interesting because coaches are all about leadership. You can do a whole podcast on leadership of coaches and how it's the opposite of what Donald Trump does in every possible way, of a team, of a big group of people that are doing one's on one side and one's on the other side. And your job is to make the whole thing go as good as possible. And that's what a coach is, a leader. Trump does everything the opposite of what Tom Coughlin would do, of what even what Belichick would do. All right. He does the opposite of what those, and that's what's even more confusing, is this is what these guys do. And Trump's leadership skills are like anti-leadership skills. It's actually how to, tear a freaking team apart, which is what he's doing with our country. He's tearing it apart.
Yeah, well, see, I was going to get to coaches with you, because to me that's the next thing, because I agree with you. I think coaches are, and it's funny, I've kind of come across, there's a couple former Dolphins who I'm friends with on Facebook, and they're very, very conservative, okay, but I'm friendly with them, okay, and they're both white, not surprising, okay, in that regard, but they have, so sometimes I'll get into it with them a little bit on Facebook, but it's friendly because I've known these guys, I cover these guys, but there are coaches, former Dolphins coaches, who they're friends with. And I've ended up getting into it with guys I covered, and I will say this, Sage, they're all offensive line coaches. I don't think that's a coincidence either, but I end up getting into it. And one of them, basically used, a version of the N-word, okay, in a reply to me. And I'm thinking, I covered this guy for 5 years, okay, and he had black offensive linemen on his unit. And so I kind of went back at him. I'm like, so I said and I'm not going to say the first name, but it started with a P. I said, what do you really mean by that? Okay. And he's like, oh, don't start branding me a racist. But it was very clear from what he said that what he meant. And I'm thinking to myself, man, I covered at least 3 African-American offensive linemen during my time when he was the offensive line coach there. And so I do wonder, like you said, because I do think that with coaches, there is much more of a tendency to go that direction. But you're right. It's all antithetical. And the NFL to me is fascinating in this regard, right? Because conservatives hate socialism, right? The NFL is a socialist league, okay? The NBA is not as much. Major League Baseball is not at all, right? Major League Baseball does not have a salary cap. But the NFL, it's revenue sharing, it's salary cap. The whole premise of the entire league, it's parity, right? It's making sure that the lower teams have a chance.
By the way, the military is the most socialist thing we have in this country.
Right,
and
right.
It's run to a freaking T, and yada yada yada. So
yeah, and with the NFL, it is really. I mean, the whole premise is socialism. The whole damn thing. I mean, the NBA is much more individualistic, okay, than the NFL is.
By the way, and yet, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys are still worth the most, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like everyone's just making the same amount of money in a sense, as far as the people who own the league. I mean, there's definitely winners and losers and people who win more than oers because of sort of that pre-designed socialism structure of how the league works.
But that, I think, is why, again, I think NFL fans were kind of an easy target for sort of this campaign about the kneeling because clearly, I mean, first thing, Trump has a vendetta against the NFL. We discussed that with Jeff Pearlman, who wrote a really fascinating book about the USFL and Trump's involvement in it and kind of how he did the same thing to the USFL that he's doing to the country right now. But so I think that's part of it. It's a vendetta. And even recently they wouldn't let him buy the Bills and all the rest of that. But also, again, the NFL fan base is more conservative than the NBA fan base and even than the MLB fan base. And so it was kind of an easy target to push this agenda. And what's been interesting to me, not just the Kaepernick thing, but the whole thing about, NFL ratings are way down, right? They've recovered this year, and you haven't heard a peep from the president, right? Like, I mean, NFL ratings are back up, okay? They're not quite where they were, but they've gone up this year. And meanwhile, NASCAR, and Chris and I have talked about this on the pod, NASCAR, which is the most conservative of all the, if you want to call it a sport, of all the sports, okay? And NASCAR ratings are in the toilet, okay? I mean, they can't sell races out. They're struggling. To me, Sage, there never was a correlation between the kneeling, because for me, for every fan who tuned it out, okay, because they were upset about the players kneeling, there were other fans who may have been tuning it out because they weren't happy about the way the Kaepernick was treated. So to me, the NFL became politicized, and in my view, it didn't need to be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think Trump finds issues with people, and he's doing it right now with the caravan. And it's, what can I do to try to divide people? Because it's the divide and conquer philosophy. That's how he feels like he's going to win this thing, is divide our country so we can basically conquer it. And I think that's the thing with the kneeling deal is, how can I divide, people and have strong opinions about it? And for whatever reason, there's a what would you call it? A sort of made up stance or a made up, I don't know if I would call it propaganda, but that conservatives appreciate the military more than liberals, or they think it's more valuable, it's more important, or whatever it might be. There's this stance there. And so if you kneel for a certain reason, which, by the way, was told by a Navy, it was an Army Ranger, Nate Boyer, to do that out of respect for the troops. But there's if you try to turn it into a thing that it's not, you can help divide the country and make this one side again look anti-military, again anti-American, unpatriotic. The military, patriotic. What is patriotism? Do you have to absolutely think the military is infallible to think this country is great, or to be a patriot, or to whatever? And I think he finds these issues in the military thing, that's one of them, is to basically, I can divide it and Republicans will win on it because I can try to make the other side look bad, look un-American, and we'll win the conversation.
Do you think, and then I want to get to the real important question, which is why you dressed up as a Teletubby on Halloween. Do you think that, let's look at LeBron real quick here. Do you think that he has ultimately enhanced his public profile and legacy by doing what he's doing? And do you think it's made some, and Jordan is always the natural foil to this, right? Because he didn't do it. Tiger doesn't do it, and all the rest of it. Do you think it's made them look somehow worse in comparison because they have not decided to step out as an athlete?
I think they've decided that it hurts their bottom line, and that's really important to them. LeBron, he'll either profit or he'll lose money because of what he is doing. But my guess is he probably sort of has a thing of, again, he wants to sleep well at night. This is important to him. It might help his brand, but hurt his pocket, and he's okay with that. He has FU money, 10,000 times more than whatever FU money that I have. Right. But he can do that. Where that works for him, and what Jordan's doing works for him. If I was in one of those two guys' spots, I would do what LeBron is doing, or try to do what LeBron is doing. And that's how I was raised. That's how that's what drives me every day to go out there and try to do, be who I am and do good things and be a patriot. And Jordan decides he feels like he does what he wants to do. So not everybody is driven by money. And I also sort of know, like, I made my money. I'm not going to go out and, sell. I'm going to sell Sage Rosenfels, socks, or like, what am I going to shoot? Like, what am I going to sell here? That I'm going to make a bunch of money off it. Some guys think that's really important, and other guys like myself, it's my money was already made during my playing days.
All right, Teletubby, why? Why did you go as a Teletubby on Halloween?
Well, first, that's 2 years in a row. I bought that a couple years ago.
So it's basically it's still fit.
What do you mean it still fits? I'm in pretty decent shape.
No, I'm saying like you wore it again because it's it's still serviceable.
Because I'm a cheap bastard, and why the hell would I go out and buy another $75 Halloween outfit when this one's
you just told us earlier you had fuck you money.
Yeah, because I don't spend a gazillion dollars a year. You know what I mean? Like, some comes in, some comes out. You always gotta make sure there's less going out than there's coming in.
And that's the way to close. All right, so good luck to you fighting Steve King on Tuesday. Hopefully we can do this with you again. And see, we got through an entire game. We got through an entire podcast without asking you to evaluate Brock Osweiler or Ryan Tannehill. So
I'll give you my one Brock Osweiler. Can I give you my Brock Osweiler? And this is my point on him when he did he have a good game like last game or 2 weeks ago or a couple weeks ago or something like
Chicago,
that?
Yeah.
Chicago game.
Chicago. Did you see what he was wearing after the game in Chicago for the press conference? Do you remember what his outfit was?
I was at that game. I'm trying to remember.
It was fairly casual, wasn't it? It was like a T-shirt and shorts.
T-shirt. He was wearing a gray T-shirt. All right, now that's my style: jeans and a gray T-shirt. When he was a Texans quarterback, he wore these sort of like douchey country club blazer, sort of, smoker's jacket things. And I'm like, who is this guy? Like, what has he done? Is he hanging out with McNair at the country club? So my thought was like, oh, he sort of became a guy's guy. Like, now he's just a simple guy. He's made his money. Like, why do I have to, dress up or whatever? I'm just a backup quarterback for the Dolphins. And all of a sudden he's playing better. So obviously he didn't play the better today, though.
No, well, they won, right? I mean, they won. He didn't have an offensive touchdown. Are you a fan of the Phillip Rivers bolo ties? On that note,
I like when guys do them. You go do your deal. That's what I like. I like guys and go. People go do their thing. I don't like when guys try too hard. That's my thing. Like if you're like just today the Michael Thomas touchdown with the phone thing. Don't try too hard. It just never goes well, I think, for anybody. It makes you don't have to try too hard. So Phillip Rivers, the bolo thing, that is him, and I'm happy he does him.
All right. Well, and Phillip Rivers also has 65 children to feed, so he definitely needs an endorsement with bolo ties. All right, follow him at Sage Rosenfels 18. Follow him on the campaign trail in Iowa until Tuesday. Hopefully, we will do this with you again, sir. We always appreciate your opinions.
I'm hoping that there's time to do it before the world blows up next time. So, hopefully we got more than a year. Shit. Call me next year, and we can talk about how Derek Carr is as the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins.
See, tease. That's a podcast tease. All right, with that, you're gone.
Thank you for listening to the Fire Ringer podcast. Thank you so much.